Mr. Christensen has over 40 years' experience in architectural design and master planning. He's worked on almost any kind of project you can think of, from dog houses to solar-heated oyster hatcheries to high-rises and large-scale master plans. He also specializes in facilitating collaborative planning workshops called design charrettes. He's lived in Bellingham since 1972 and has received over 44 national and regional design awards. He's also been actively involved in the planning of the Bellingham waterfront since 2001 with the Port and the City of Bellingham, Western Washington University, the Public Development Authority, consulting teams, and private citizens. Please join me in welcoming David Christensen.
No, it's coming here. The clicker's coming. Well, I'll start off saying, wow, didn't realize I was involved with all those people. And actually, how it did start, in your paper there, you'll see that they said I started in 2003, but actually it started in 2001. We were at the port had asked me to facilitate a little planning session, and we were to promote the waterfront to what's the advantages, what's the disadvantages of the waterfront. And at this meeting, I was told, now don't talk about Georgia Pacific. They're the big guns in the room, don't talk about them, we're playing around them, they're important. So we're at this meeting, we're planning everything around them. We were down at the boathouse. And in the back of the room, Chip Hilardes, who was the manager of Georgia Pacific, said, you know, I think we might want to be part of this planning process. You could hear a pin drop in the room. It's like, Yahoo! I pulled off the thing and we've got the crayons out, and it's like we got the waterfront plan to start on. And that started it in 2001. And that's when we first started getting a lot of people involved. Now, what is interesting here, now I'm going to boil down, I boiled down all these slides from, 200 to 100 to 50, down to 28 slides. There's been a lot of things going on. And the other day, somebody came to me, wanted to go out for coffee. They had all these ideas about waterfront planning. And they'd only been here a few years. And so we had coffee, and he's telling me all these things, and I'm like, oh, gosh. It's all been kind of thought of. And did you know that there's 10,000 more people here in Bellingham since we started this? And there's a replacement of people who have left and come back. There's probably 15 to 20,000 different people here through this process who have no idea a lot of these sketches and ideas and all this thing has been thought of leading up to where we are today. And some of that maybe need to move forward. So I'll go forward here. So this was the very first little map we did. We didn't want to do any planning. What we talked about was what is the advantages and disadvantages. We talked about the cultural, natural resources, education, environment. What are the areas that take advantage of our waterfront? And it was all talking about that. And it was kind of a promotional poster. This was back in, and this kind of started everything going. And of course, what's the first thing you do? You bring in the gurus. And so we started with the design assistance team, the local American Institute of Architects, who I was president of. We brought in gurus around to start planning process. We had the Waterfront Center from Boston come here, and we started the process. It was a kind of volunteer effort. And we came up with the design assistance team master plan for all the waterfront. From there, it went to, now it's time to get serious about planning, and we had the Waterfront Futures Group. And this was a lot of people, a variety of people from the community. We had engineering, we had environmental, we had marine trades. It was kind of that triple bottom line of everything, representing finance, environment, social aspects that were important to how we develop the waterfront, because it needs to be a balance of all those things. And they spent hundreds and hundreds of hours going through this process. And when we started this, we actually were planning the entire waterfront, everything in the city of Bellingham, all the way down by Woodstock Farms, all the way up past the cement plant. We went through and planned all that area about what should happen, how will we put the vision on how this should go. And we had a plan for the Waterfront Center that came out of this Waterfront Futures Group that would lead to vignettes and sketches of what this could look like. even the grand picture of, what should happen here? What could happen here? And everyone got very excited about doing this because the community got involved, all kinds of ideas. I mean, wild, wacky ideas from anything you could think of. Anything you can think of has been documented. I mean, from, wild carousels and funiculars up to the college to, just one big park to nothing but industry to, everything in between, all that. Then, so you've got this Waterfront Futures document. And we've got all these mini plans and kind of guiding principles of what is important for guiding the waterfront. Then we have the Waterfront Advisory Group, the WAG. So these are also other people from the community looking like herding cats here down on the waterfront. And when that was all done, we kind of did a charrette and kind of boiled all this down to a written document. We were kind of brainstorming this thing to, these are the kind of metrics for how the development should move forward. Then we did kind of a initial master plan with the port here of how this property could happen, where should open space be, how the connectivity of trails should happen around here, and what are vignettes of what those could look like. So that these are kind of guiding principles as we move forward on the waterfront. It's a unique opportunity here. What should happen here? It's a time to think about planning for the long term about how it could develop, and this was part of that guiding principles. Meanwhile, while all this is going, so the city and port are going through this process. The city was disagreeing with some early master plans about the grid of the connectivity to downtown. What way should the streets go? If you know Bellingham, it's a crash of three communities, Seaholm, Bellingham, Fairhaven, and all the grids kind of crash together downtown. It's very difficult to tell somebody how to get from Fairhaven to Birchwood. Just go to the freeway and take the exit, So there was other plans developed, the center plan, and talked about this. And then meanwhile, there's other independent plans happening, and this is one with John Blethen was promoting how the best to develop this. So other individual consultants, active citizens have other plans that say this is the best way to do this, incorporating all the things that have been talked about because we felt the consultants from out of town weren't getting it. And then there's yet another group, the Bellingham Bay Foundation, and they hired gurus from Denver to come out here to plan how this should happen. And there was other city fathers coming and contributing to this effort. And you can actually see some of the original watercolors they did for the Bellingham Bay Foundation over here against the wall on the chairs. Pretty gorgeous renderings about, where is this thing going? What should this look like? And how do we get there? There's yet another variation on a private citizen plan. And then another city plan for how this should happen. And so all this kind of going back and forth is going on to able to narrow down the metrics of how the development plan should happen. And there was sketches and renderings. God, just think if we had all the money for all the consultants on this, we could actually probably build something, I think. I am sure. And then, so there's this conflict between the city and the port about how it should happen best for the community. And so a group of local architects, we call ourselves the Architects Evaluation Team, got together here and we decided we're going to help the city and port come together on this thing. We made a presentation to council and the port and talked about what are the best things of both items and how we can blend them all together. And we ended up with this evaluation of all the different things. We had this long presentation here and I didn't want to put them all here. But at the very end, I said, a revised layout must create a wow factor. Some for economic development and community connection to our waterfront. That's what was missing. We needed that, something to engage the public to say, wow, I can't wait to do that. That would be so cool. Then, meanwhile, Western is also doing something because they have a property down there also that they are being allocated to do either an environmental campus or arts campus or something down there. So I was involved with that. Okay, and they were putting through, we did a big study to see how, if they developed down there, how should that work for them? How would it take advantage of the waterfront, the connectivity, the location on the planet? I mean, they were very cosmic. We had gurus from all over coming together on that thing. It was very exciting. Then the Public Development Authority also had a plan when they had the Army Street here and how to connect down to the waterfront, and how this connection happened down to Boulevard Park. Not Boulevard Park, Cornwall Park. And you can kind of see a trail connection, kind of a big gray area, kind of this no man's land that we're kind of still working on. But the plan should be, how does this happen over time? I mean, it can be light industrial or whatever uses initially, but how will it change over time? As we know, all zones change over time, all plans. So something that started off as a small one-story, now is a four-story, and it'll just keep changing. But we got to plan for that eventual future. And so there was actually a plan for Boulevard, or for Cornwall Park, that had how the property could develop, the open space down there. You see it right now. It's where the big white tarps are right down there. And creating a public space down there and some private development in this variation. And then connecting an overwater walkway over to Boulevard Park. And you can see from this rendering, that was kind of coming from Boulevard Park over to the Cornwall Park. So there was all kinds of things. And he was engaging the Native American tribes around here, how we can celebrate their history and prehistory before a white man came here. Then there was a lot of detailed study. There was stormwater analysis about how should stormwater be analyzed on the site. I mean, went through environment, details, engineering, all kinds of stuff. And of course, you know, all this used to be water out here. So it's all fill. So it all needs piling. I mean, and Georgia Pacific has made some toxic things down there. And then, of course, the other consultants have come in and say, hey, we want to develop something right now. We're tired of waiting. It's been a long time. And so this is the granary building. And you see at the top, that's what it looks like today. And this was an idea of redeveloping, and there's developers ready to do that. Now Harcourt has this to develop it, but there's been several ideas on how this can be very viable. It's a very historic building and can happen. Then, lastly, this was the original Harcourt development. You may not have seen this, but this was when the port put out a proposal, this is what it looked like. And it was very visionary, looking at how is the best way to have some excitement and build something connective here. You know, it needs to listen a lot. You know, planning and design is actually pretty easy. You just have to listen and do a design. I mean, I have maybe architectural skills that you don't, or drawing, but it's just listening to what you say. And that's what the plan needs to do in moving forward with the community. Now, one thing, I don't know how many of you knew Mike Cole, who passed away recently. And if you read his obituary, something at the end there really struck me. It's a wise man who plants a tree under whose shade he will never sit. And, you know, if you think we were just talking at our table here, you know, if the forefathers at New York City had never planned for Central Park, I mean, it just wouldn't have happened. It's too valuable land, but they thought this is important. And way back when, before it was insane to dedicate that much land for a Central Park. And that kind of thing, that kind of long-term thinking needs to happen here about where this will end up going. So it's thinking with the end in mind and always remembering and getting that excitement back again about re-engaging. It's been several years, it's been kind of quiet zone here for a while, and a lot of people don't know everything that's gone on in the past. But a lot of things are in documents about our planning principles, our guiding principles, and those things should probably be looked at again to make sure that where this is going now is ending up where we want our grandchildren to be. Thank you.
My name is Sandy Lawrence, and I'm a relatively new member of City Club. I'd like to ask a deliberately provocative question about sea level rise. I've been studying a lot about energy systems and climate change the last few years. And in Antarctica, there are a couple of interesting phenomena taking place. In West Antarctica, there's an area where there's an unstoppable melt that could add up to 4 feet of sea level rise, and an equivalent area in East Antarctica that could add 10 feet. Now, this will take time, but according to the IPCC, we could have as much as 4 feet of sea level rise by the end of the century. That's 85 years, one lifetime. So the question is, at what point does all this development become vulnerable to the changes in the coast?
I'll start. You know, during the planning process, that was a big issue. Do you plan for it? I mean, obviously, the rest of the world has a bigger problem than just us. I mean, you could build a moat around us, but everything else floats. So was it 6 feet? Was it 3 feet? what's interesting is actually doing a cap on the site actually makes some sense because of some of the toxics there. So actually going up about 3 or 4 feet at least made some sense for planning, because actually a lot of the infrastructure and utilities could actually just kind of lay on the ground, and actually you would build up from there. So it was planned for something like that happening, at least in the initial plans. But do we put a dike out on Bellingham Bay? Wow, there's, the predictions varied quite a bit. Down in Olympia, I remember they said they settled on 3 feet. Is it going to get worse? Is it going to get less? We had experts from A to Z, and we kind of settled on 3 feet, as I recall.
My name is Brian Griffin. Several months ago, I got a good look at the Harcourt plan, and I was very impressed with it. Now that Harcourt has been selected, and you're about to sign a contract, I presume, is there enough wiggle room in your planning to accommodate some of their plans?
I know in the urban village plans, which this is incorporated, it's built into it to have design departures, because things change over time for the market, demand. I mean, something that should be commercial, maybe residential, or vice versa, mixed use, and form follows financing rate a lot of times. It doesn't necessarily follow function. So things will change, and if there's a departure from the prescriptive, or from the prescriptive way, there's a performance way to meet the intent of design guidelines. That's the way it's kind of written. Isn't that right, Tara?
I'd just like to ask a question that will clarify for me and maybe for others. In some of the initial drawings and the community visionings, and in the original Harcourt proposal that you all referred to, and what Kelly, you said about the connectivity from downtown, there was this green park-like kind of connectivity. I'm wondering, I'm not sure, but can you explain how the initial phase of development will or will not preclude any of that from happening?
I'll just add that, I'm just the messenger here, and in listening to the community, even though the latest plan shows, at least for the moment here, shipping terminal and industrial land kind of blocking the development going south, it was a huge demand of trying to have a long-term connectivity from Fairhaven to Boulevard Park, over to Cornwall Beach, through the property, up over through to downtown, in a kind of a green space common thing that needs to happen. And it can happen, and going through the early process here, and this will change over time here, but when I'm listening to consultants we had for the Waterfront Futures Group and the WAG, they, at least long-term, felt that it wasn't very viable having a lot of heavy industrial or even light industrial use that needed shipping access because of the train access, because of truck access. It was just difficult at this site, even though we have a deep harbor pier there. So I'm just looking long-term out there, and having that connectivity was extremely important to everyone I heard, and having that happen somehow, it will be important as we move forward in the 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Mayor, I have one concern is, since the city planning department takes between 4 and 6 weeks to approve a set of drawings for a single-family home, is the city prepared to give Harcourt reasonable response time on the review of their plans?
This was in the early planning stage. This was really important, is that there was some predictability for developers. Otherwise, they wouldn't come. Bellingham is known in the past for a very long, arduous public process, and they want some predictability. Now, the urban village plan has some of that if you go prescriptive, but if it's a grand enough plan that makes sense, that meets the intent, it could also move forward. And I think the mayor's right that the staff has really increased the review time. It's really improved significantly in the city. And I think that will be the goal that's in one of our planning principles early, is having a predictable path to get permits.
Great. I know we could stay for a long time with more questions, but we're actually past our time to end. So I want to, first of all, ask you to thank the speakers for being here today, all of them.